Hello, everyone. We are live as far as I can tell, and if you are here and coming on, I'd appreciate when you do get here if you drop a hello in the chat, then I'll know that you're here. Um, this is Linda Wilk. I'm your resident recovery coach, and I'd love to hear from you. Our topic tonight is going to be spiritual recovery. And there is a lot of literature available on this, both in the big book, the step book, and in pamphlets and other things that are available in 12 step recovery. I've been doing a little research preparing for this presentation, and I'm hoping that you all will come on and talk about your own recovery. I'll tell you a little bit about myself to start out. I've been in recovery since May of 1981. I know it's not common to stay in continuous recovery, but I've been blessed that I was. And I will tell you that when I came into recovery, I really did not want to hear the word God. I was carrying a lot of baggage from my own upbringing in a pretty strict religious background. My mother, she would have called herself a Southern Baptist, although she was raised in Brooklyn, but she was raised in a pretty evangelical Baptist church, and she felt that you should maintain a childlike faith in God and Jesus, and she raised us with that, and it was pretty strict, rigid faith. And through the process of being raised in that faith, but being in an alcoholic home, there were a lot of inconsistencies. And by the time I was 12 or 13 years old, I was pretty much done with it. And I carried that with me, and I carried my fears and my anger about the church into AA, and I really didn't want to hear the word God. So my first sponsor told me what it says in the big book, which is, why don't you try your own conception of a higher power? She asked me what I wished that God would be like. And I decided that if a group of 50 to 60 people sitting in a room could stay sober and I couldn't, then most likely that group of drunks, GOD, would suffice for a higher power for quite a while. And that's what I called my higher power, group of drunks. Later, my higher power became the great outdoors, and then the universe, and it's been lots of things over the years. I finally came to see, as I continued to work the steps, that when people say God, if they understand the program, what they're saying is their own understanding of a higher power. And so I came to accept the word God after several years, that when you say the word God, you put your own understanding into it. When I say the word God, so do I, and that's okay. And I softened. I also came to understand that my anger at God was really anger at these people within the church and their inability to hear me, a little girl who was in a lot of pain, and that I was actually angry at the people who didn't understand or hear what I was going through. Of course, I never told them. But, I thought that people should get it, that there was a sad little girl sitting in front of them, and they never really did get it. However, you people in AA, you got it. You really understood, especially my sponsor, who had 26 years sober. And although she never really said it out loud, she made it clear that she understood, and she must have been through some of the same things herself because, she put her arm around me eventually. She certainly put her hand out to me. She welcomed me. She made sure that I knew at least 4 or 5 other women who were like her. She made sure that I reached out to other young people in the program as a greeter, that I got into service right away, so that I connected with other people in the program like myself. And that connected me to the program, to hearing other people who were sober much longer than me, um, and then to other newcomers, so that I got into service myself and I felt like I belonged. I didn't always want to do the things that were asked of me. For instance, I didn't want to clean ashtrays. I didn't want to make coffee. I didn't want to put away chairs. I didn't want to wipe down tables. However, that kept me at the meetings after the meeting itself was over, and that connected me to my original home group, and that made me a part of things. And there is something spiritual about that. It's not always that we are being spiritual by praying or meditating or doing the things that we think we have to do. Sometimes the things that we do that are just helping another person in the room, those are the things that are the spiritual things in the program as well. We might not understand them that way when we first come in, but that's what happens. We do the things that we're told, and in the process of doing those things, we find out that we're part of the whole of AA, and or of other 12-step programs, and we become more and more and more a feeling like we get more and more feeling like we are part. So that's the beginning of my spirituality, and as I stayed a part of things, trying to get my full screen back up here. As I stayed more and more a part of things, I looked more and more uh, towards understanding spirituality, towards understanding. Um, oh boy, I'm trying to operate this dashboard at the same time. Hi, Lisa. It's nice to see you here. Let's see who. Oh, Tiffany. Hi, honey. How are you? Glad to see you. So as I became more and more part of things, I understood and started to explore more. But I'd like to read you. I have a couple little things here about spirituality in the program, and then I'd like to hear some things from you. There's a little pamphlet in the program called Many Paths to Spirituality, and I didn't discover it for quite a long time. It's a relatively new pamphlet. It starts out a kinship of common suffering. And Bill W., there's a quote from him from the Grapevine from July of 65. It says newcomers are approaching AA at the rate of tens of thousands yearly. Now it's probably hundreds of thousands. They represent almost every belief and attitude imaginable. We have atheists and agnostics. We have people of nearly every race, culture, and religion. In AA, we are supposed to be bound together in the kinship of a common suffering. Consequently, the full individual liberty to practice any creed or principle or therapy whatever should be a first consideration for us all. Let us not therefore pressure anyone with our individual or even our collective views. Let us instead accord each other the respect and love that is due to every human being as he tries to make his way toward the light. Let us always try to be inclusive rather than exclusive. Let us remember that each alcoholic among us is a member of AA. so long as he or she so declares. And I love that quote because I would never want to exclude anybody else and their beliefs. And I didn't realize in the beginning that when I was so angry at God and I would say, I don't want to hear that word God, that in fact I was excluding other people from their beliefs. I had to learn that I had to be accepting of others. And if I wanted them to be accepting, that I couldn't handle certain things, that it's okay to be silent and to keep my beliefs to myself. And I say a higher power of my own understanding. I often will use the word higher power if there's newcomers in the room, just so that they understand that they have the freedom of their own beliefs. So I don't know, what about you? I welcome questions as well as sharing a little bit of your own story and your own journey with your own spirituality. You have to type or speak your comments. Unfortunately, I can't see you, so I don't know what you're thinking or how you're feeling about things if you don't tell me. So, is anybody game to share a little bit? I think this is one of the most fun topics. It's really interesting to hear other people's spiritual journeys, both the similarities and the differences. I just discovered tonight that there is a new book out from Grapevine. Well, I guess it's not completely new, but it's a really fun book, and it's called One Big Tent. Grapevine puts out a lot of books. These are all conference approved literature, and it is atheist and agnostic AA members share their experience, strength, and hope. And at first I thought, what the heck, this is going to be a strange book. But actually, it is a really amazing book. I'm trying to see if I can find, thought I put it up here. See if I can find where I shared it. Oh, yeah. It's pretty fascinating. So I pulled a story up from here. This says, this is by somebody named Gabriella R. This is from October of 2016. As an AA member who is a non-believer, one who does not have a God, and in oh, it's a he in his life, I'm grateful to be continuously sober for 26 years since my introduction to AA at the age of 53. At my first meeting, I became hopeful I could stay sober because inspiring, healthy, and happy people shared about their drinking and their recoveries. That hope turned to skepticism, however, when I read Higher Power and God in the 12 Steps, and then to downright dismay when the Lord's Prayer was used at the end of a meeting. This was clearly religion in disguise, a rigid way of belief, I thought. Still, something powerful was happening to me. Perhaps hope was coming my way after all. I was determined to have sobriety in AA without being false to myself. I persevered despite the admonitions in our literature of the necessity of believing in a God and the belittling of my non belief in the 12 steps and 12 traditions. Early on in my sobriety, I read the doctor's opinion in the big book as well as the modern descriptions of the disease of alcoholism. They provided logical explanations of what was wrong with me and helped me come to terms with my alcoholism. I also read widely about treatments for alcoholism and became encouraged about my chances of staying sober in AA if I got involved in AA as much as I had drunk. So I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. I eventually did the suggested 12 steps so that I could teach them to others. For the third step, which involves a prayer, I analyzed the meaning of the words and found that I could move on to the rest of the steps to achieve the purpose stated in the prayer. The same goes for the seventh step. I can do the actions mentioned in the 11th step without praying. At the start of each new day, I look to see what I can do for others. During the day, I pause when confused or agitated and restart the day if necessary. And at the end of the day, I constructively review my actions of the day. Over the years, some of my AA friends have come to describe me as a big book atheist. There's the one who calls me the most spiritual, open, and well read atheist I've ever met. I don't argue with anyone about belief or non belief. I know firsthand that the program of action outlined in our textbook can be effectively taken without a belief in a God. That's what I say when I tell my story. I do not have a God and do not pray. I say I can be in good spirits without taking spirits. I'll stop there for now. So people find different ways around. Oh, look. Hi, Amy Louise, and hi, Tanya. So that's, one person's feeling. Amy Louise says she was raised very religious, but as an adult, she's been attending a lot of atheist and agnostic online meetings. Yeah, that's the newest branch of AA, and it's pretty amazing. And Tanya says she needed AA recovery in church. So that's the point of us sharing tonight, is that we can all have very different paths and we can all get along and share. I have an online step study. A few of my friends and myself have studied mindfulness, like from a Buddhist perspective. And some of us are Christians. I'm a Quaker, which is a Christian denomination, but kind of a liberal one. And, we all have managed, we've been together for over 5 years, and we have learned, to be very, very accepting and understanding and to really learn from each other about our different spiritual beliefs. And it's been really enlightening to learn and be open. And through that, I've actually learned, not to be so rejecting of the way my mom raised me, even though it was very hard to grow up in such a rigid belief system. But I've learned some understanding from my friends that, are in that kind of a tradition, but not in such a rigid way. So it's kind of fun when we can be more open and tolerant and share about our spiritual beliefs. Anyone else want to share? One of the things I think that kind of shocked me was that I thought I was raised in a tradition where if you practice mindfulness or things like that, that was considered sin. And I learned through practicing that it's not a religious thing, it's a practice, a behavioral practice that helps you to focus in and learn more about yourself. So when we talk about prayer and meditation in the big book, learning a mindfulness practice can be really helpful, to learn how to practice meditation. And in one of my mindfulness workshops that I took, the woman said very surprisingly, anyone can meditate. And she said, you know how your head gets spinning sometimes, when you're really upset about something and something keeps turning over and over and over in your head and you can't get rid of it? She said, that's meditation. That's the same thing. It's just negative meditation. She said, if that happens to you and you do that, then you're very capable of meditation. She said, you just have to learn how to turn it around and do it in a positive way. So that sort of opened my eyes that, in the last cafe, I was talking about how you can use a positive thing like prayer, like the prayer of St. Francis or the serenity prayer, as a practice to alleviate those kind of obsessive thoughts when they come into your head. And what you do is you just we'll use the serenity prayer since it's so simple, but you could just break the serenity prayer down into pieces. So you would breathe in and go, God grant me On the in breath, the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And you just keep repeating it. So when you have those kind of repetitive thoughts that you can't get out of your head, like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? What's this job going to be like? How's this interview going to go? Blah, 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 all that kind of stuff that races in your head. You just substitute saying something like the serenity prayer over and over in your head to replace those racing thoughts. And if this, even saying the serenity prayer is too much, then you could just go surrender, 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 surrender. And just keep repeating it until it erases those repetitive thoughts. So you begin to learn mindfulness practice. And of course, eventually, you probably heard that people say just use your breath. You always carry your breath with you. And your breath is a tremendous meditation tool because you can learn to just observe your breath as it comes in and out. Some people count, they'll count like 1, 2, 3, 4. As they breathe in, hold it for 4, and then breathe out for 4, and then hold it for 4 again, and then keep repeating that. So that's a mindfulness practice, and it's not, Buddhism is not a religion, it's just a spiritual practice. So you can combine it with whatever other religion that you have. So, any other thoughts? Amy, how have you found the atheist and agnostic recovery meetings? I know we don't have any, I don't think we have any local meetings. I think mostly when I've attended any atheist and agnostic meetings, it's been in a city. I think there's one in Frederick, and I've been to one in Germantown. I think what happened as I've stayed in recovery is that I have become able to substitute my own words, my own thoughts. In the beginning, I was saying that I use you probably heard like good orderly direction, group of drunks. I say the great outdoors. Yeah, my understanding is the others are a drive. Yes, it is a longer distance, but there are getting to be more and more. The other meetings that I've found helpful, there are these meetings called Recovery Dharma, and they are mindfulness practice. They don't follow a um, a 12-step thing, but they substitute the principles of mindfulness for that. Yeah, I like the word substitutions too, and I like to think up my own. My daughter, her higher power is the moon and the stars because she feels like there's nothing she can do to control the moon and the stars, and so it reminds her there's she's not God, she's not the center of the universe. So when she looks out at the moon and the stars, it's like, well, I guess I'm not in control here, and that helps her to let go. So you know people have to find like what works for them. And if God and Jesus works for you, if you don't have baggage from that, then that's great, and it makes it a little easier, I guess. But if you do have baggage, then it's okay to find your own way. For me, what was my baggage was the inconsistency between being raised with this really strict, like, do unto others thing, and then being raised in a really violent alcoholic home. None of it made sense to me. So I had to really make peace with that. And luckily, actually, the 12 steps and working the steps were really, really helpful to me with that. And I'm grateful, like, that actually that we have Celebrate Recovery and other programs for people who are Christian, because just like some of us have trouble with the God aspect of the program, there are people for whom the program is not Christian enough, and so now we have programs that help with that. So I'm happy for that as well. I think any place that you can find a home, I think that's a helpful thing. And there are people who go to programs like Smart Recovery, which are more behavioral focused. And if you struggle with thinking that the program is too religious, that's another option. the the thing for me though is that I've always found that, well, not always, for after the beginning of the program, I guess I would say, is that the 12 steps are actually a program for living and give you a lot of tools, and so I would hate to throw that away because of having trouble with the spiritual aspects of the program. And in the beginning, I found a lot of peace in nature and just getting outdoors. And to me, spiritual is not necessarily just about God, but about the sense of connection that you feel. And some of that is felt between people, but some of it is also felt by getting into the outdoors and into nature, and having it helps you develop a sense of trust in the world. So, what are some of the ways that you have reestablished a sense of connection, whether it's with God or with nature or however? What are the things that have helped you to feel a sense of trust in the world or a sense of connection in the world? Anyone have any thoughts about that? Have you seen the book Came to Believe, that is conference approved literature? It's a little book, either blue or white cover. I found that to be a really helpful resource. It's little stories, short, maybe 1, 2, 3 page stories of people's recovery with spirituality as they came in the program. I'm thinking I would love to move this cafe to Zoom so that I can see everybody. I find it hard not to be able to kind of look at people face to face. Going for walks outside, yeah, it does help. It's interesting. Yeah, keeping a journal sometimes can help, It's Came to Believe is available. Some meetings have copies of it. I know the morning meeting has copies, and maybe the 5:30 meeting at the clubhouse. But a lot of the bigger meetings have copies of it. It's a nice book because it covers all different aspects of di- different ways that people find spirituality. So it's nice to sometimes read stories where you might relate to different forms of spirituality, including people who are atheist and agnostic or just finding themselves. Because it's hard. Like, people don't share that much about their spirituality in meetings. Although it's a good topic, I think, to bring up in a meeting sometimes, just to hear people share some of the, both their struggles and their wins with their spirituality. And just to kind of keep an open mind. I think in the beginning I found it hard because I found we agnostics, I felt like it was telling me that I had to eventually go in a certain direction. Now, when I read it, I don't hear that quite as much because I think I'm not as rigid as I was, as resistant as I was in the beginning, because I've found my own peace with that my beliefs aren't quite as the same as those of the big book, and that it's okay. So now when I read it, I realize no, everybody finds their own path. But in the beginning, I just would read it and I'd be like, oh, stop it. You're trying to make me believe a certain way. Now I don't read it quite the same way as I did in the beginning. Oh, that's great, Tanya. Interacting with the seven kittens that have adopted me. Yes. I think, in fact, when I first wanted to get a cat, when I first was sober, my sponsor gave me a plant first, and she said, "You're not ready for a cat yet." And she said, let's see if you can keep a plant alive for a couple months. And when I could do that, then she went with me to the Humane Society, and I got a really beautiful cat that became my best friend for like 7 years. And it was really wonderful. And an older cat. And that really brought took away some of the emptiness in my life, right? I'm sure, is that what you're feeling? Some that they really fill a hole in your life. I think there's nothing like that feeling of having an animal that really connects with you and with your heart. Definitely. Yeah. Yeah, I discovered actually that I'd had a love of plants that my dad, who was, I really hated at the time I got sober, but I realized years later after I made living amends that it was my dad that had taught me to love gardening, and that was a real healing thing to realize there was something good between us, that he had taught me very, very young to love planting plants. And I went on to have a garden. Yeah. So wherever I go now, I always have a garden, and I have tons and tons of animals now too. That's a real connection. I don't know if you guys can hear my dogs are barking in the background because I won't let them in the room. So I'm pretty connected to my animals as well. But even if you're not like allowed to have an animal where you are, if you live in an apartment or whatever, going to the Humane Society, they have this new program where you can take a dog out for a day or go and walk the dogs there or play with the cats there, because they've realized that it helps so much if the animals have interaction and training. So, if you are lonely that way, if you're in early recovery, you can go and interact with the animals, and and help. Not just like it used to be, you could just go and clean up poop and do things like that, which was not really appealing. But now they have a take an animal out for a day program, so the animals get socialization. So I think that's a really wonderful new thing that they've instituted in a lot of humane societies and SPCAs, that is really good for our hearts in recovery, so that I think is a really spiritual thing also. And then the whole concept of service and doing service, I don't think people realize a lot of times, that the concept of that is really spiritually centered. Like, whether it's that we just are reaching a hand out at the door to welcome a newcomer, or even if all we're doing is cleaning up and helping, the chairperson, or just, doing it for ourselves to clean up the tables or help put books away or whatever, that there is really something spiritual about that because often we have a hard time fitting in, you know? And every little piece that we do where we reach out and connect with others, even very small things like that, is building spiritual connection, which is something I don't know about you, but it never came naturally to me. And I think my first sponsor really sensed that about me. I was scared to even walk into meetings. Like, I'm grateful they didn't have online meetings when I started out because I would have probably never gone out of my apartment. You know, I hid out my apartment when I drank, and I would have probably hid out and just stayed behind the screen. I would have probably never turned my video on or anything, you know, because I was so scared of people and of change. And I would, there were no cell phones when I got sober. I had to call my sponsor. I had to call other people and say, "Are you going to a meeting?" And if even if that's all I could choke out. And then I would meet people outside the meeting and walk in with them. And then my sponsor was kind of clever, I think, because she would say, you know, look at those girls coming in, look at those guys, they're hitting on them. Get up there, put your hand out to those girls and tell them to come sit at our table. And it had the impact of making me put my hand out to other people when I was terrified. So it made me connect with other people. And half the time, I'd been drinking since I was 10 years old and doing other substances. I had no social skills. You know, I was still like a little teeny bopper in my head, even though I was 27. So for me, that forced me to do the things that did not come naturally to me. And I had to learn how to, you know, to reach out my hand, to talk to people, even if it was just to say, "Hi, oh, will you come sit here?" And it made me feel a part of. You know, it made that spiritual connection. So, you know, spiritual connection is not always like God. It's our connection to other human beings, our presence with other human beings. It could be as simple as when you go in a meeting and you see that girl sitting across the way by herself, and you go and sit next to her and just say hello, you know, and you may not realize what you're doing at the time, but you might be saving her life, you know. It's that simple. So we're not always conscious of the way, you know, our higher power is guiding us at the time, or our higher power working through a sponsor is guiding us. It's kind of interesting the way that works. I have the sense that, you know, the universe leads the people to me that I'm supposed to meet, and and that there's no accidents that way. Like the way you and I met, Tanya. So So what else? What else do you consider spiritual in your life? Have you had any experiences like kind of, you know, coincidences that impacted you that I know I've had a few. Try not to just fill up the space. It's hard to be quiet when you can't hear uh people on the other end. A moment and look back over your recovery and think about what you might not have called spiritual experiences at the time, but that you might think of spiritual experiences now. I'll tell you a funny one. Um, we live on a little dirt road. There's only two houses on the road. And when we moved here, we hadn't been going to meetings for about 7 years. And my husband ended up having a relapse. But before I realized that's what was going on, our neighbor, they kept asking us, he'd come over and he'd have a beer in his hand. He'd say, "You want a beer? You want a beer?" And finally, I said, "We don't drink, we haven't drank in years." And he'd go like, "Oh, are you one of those AA people?" over his beer. Finally, he said, "Oh, you should meet my sister-in-law. She's the president of AA." And I started kind of laughing at this. I started thinking, well, she must be pretty active in AA. I knew enough about AA. We had stopped going to meetings because we moved to an area of the country where the meetings were really kind of backwoods. It was very, very rural, and we just didn't like the meetings, and we'd kind of gotten out of the habit. And we had each other, and we talked the program all the time. We thought we don't need these meetings. That was a bad, bad decision. But anyway, it was pretty funny because he kept telling me about this woman, and how active she was, and she knew everything there was about AA. And this was before I knew that my husband was drinking, and I was kind of in denial. But finally, we things just went downhill. I kept saying to my husband, "Do you think we should go back to AA?" And he'd say, "Oh yeah, yeah, yeah," but then we never got there. About a month passed, and within that month, he wrecked all three of our cars, and I kept thinking he was having mini stroke. That's how I was in denial. But anyway, when finally they called me that he had wrecked our last car on Pennsylvania Turnpike and he was in the hospital, and she says to me he has a blood alcohol level of some outrageous amount. I said, "He can, he's sober." And she said, "Not anymore, he's not." And it was a terrible, terrible day. Well, in that moment, I thought, "Oh my gosh, I have to get back to AA." So he's in. I said he had to go to rehab, and he did. And while he was in rehab, I went to this meeting. The guy had told me his sister-in-law's name. As soon as she walked in and said her name and that she was an alcoholic, she was so outgoing and outspoken. I went, "Oh, that must be his sister-in-law." And we became very good friends. We're like sisters now, and we've been ever since. And I thought, see, my higher power was trying to put this woman in my path for months. And here she is right when I need her. And she and a friend of hers, they took me to like 2 or 3 meetings a day for the whole month that my husband was in rehab. It was like a godsend, it was no coincidence. And it was like a little minor miracle because I was like a dry drunk. I was so upset about my husband and I was so torn up. I couldn't stop crying. I was like a beginner, you know. And she just said, "I know just what you need." And she knew all the meetings in the whole area. She was like the president of AA. And but she turned out to be my little miracle worker, and she had I think about 2 or 3 years recovery at that point, and she was still really gung ho AA, and she just took me everywhere I needed to go, introduced me to my new sponsor here, and helped me to get really active in the program. And I just kept, being so grateful, thanking God. Just, I was willing to do anything at that point because I was really, really broken down and didn't know what to do. And so I considered that like a little AA miracle that that exact person walked in the door that first morning that I was in a meeting and just kind of scooped me up and took care of me for my first month back in the meeting. So I hadn't drunk, but I it was as much as I could have. Hey, Linda, nice to see you. Nice to see you. So yeah, I mean, we have all kinds, right? As you know, Linda, I am no longer a person who is afraid of people. That was just like my little backslide, but yeah, it's amazing. I love it. And then my sponsor, oh, I've always had tough sponsors. Yeah, we are definitely not alone. It's the truth. And our whatever kind of higher power we have just the right kind of higher power that we need. And for me, that higher power has evolved and grown over the years with me. And somebody said to me a short time ago, "Who's grown and evolved?" I've grown and evolved, and my vision of my higher power has grown and evolved as I have grown and evolved. And that's just perfect. That's just fine. I hope that never stops happening, you know. So that's yeah. What's your sobriety date, Linda? I want to know when that comes up. That's wonderful. 33 years. And we are not alone, whatever our vision of that is. You know, I'll tell you a funny thing. When I was only 6 years old, I had a vision, um, literally a vision, a dream, that we're all energy. The whole world is surrounded by energy, and that when we come into a human body, that energy comes into a human body, and when we die, that energy goes back to that energy. Nothing has ever convinced me of anything different. So I think that's the energy that, what some people say is your soul. But, they say ashes to ashes, dust to dust, energy to energy. And, when my mother died, I was sitting with her, and right before, and I felt that energy. I really felt it. And then she was gone, and I felt that too. So, I think that's the energy that's our spirit. Thank you, Linda. I'm writing that down. I'm really blessed to know so many people in long-term recovery in this particular geographical area. And now I've been meeting people all over the country thanks to Zoom, and really thanks to COVID. Was the blessing of COVID, is that it gave us all these Zoom meetings. I've been speaking at meetings like all over the country. It's so much fun. It's really a miracle. So, there are all different ways to perceive our spiritual journey, our spiritual life. I think the important thing is really understanding that we grow in all different aspects. The first year of our recovery, sometimes even longer, we spend just physically getting the alcohol and the drugs out of our bodies. And so, that's in the first three steps what we talk about. We have to get our bodies clear. It's hard to even understand what's going on in our lives and in our bodies. It's hard to do anything else. That's why they talk about, if you're not in a relationship, no emotional involvements, to give you time to just clear your body and get healthy. you know, then emotionally, once we clear that out, physically, then mentally, our brain just starts working. So the second stage is mental recovery, to get our brains functioning. And we understand so much about the science of the recovery of the brain that actually, when we're drinking and drugging, our body stops manufacturing its own dopamine and serotonin. And then, after that, which can take up to 2 or 3 years, then actually is when we start being able to develop these emotional tools and to start to develop spiritually. It's really pretty remarkable that we can even function. And I mean, there truly, it is remarkable that that they have now. Like they didn't have serotonin reuptake inhibitors, like Zoloft and can't think of the other ones, but the modern antidepressants, they didn't even have those when I got sober. So it's pretty remarkable that they can even offer people medications like that now, and to help to level out the brain. But there are also supplements and things that people can take to heal their brains that just they didn't even know those things exist, you know. There's a wonderful series of videos you can watch if you want to understand what happens to the brain when we drink and drug. They're called Pleasure Unwoven. I'll type them in here. But they're on YouTube, and they're done by a guy who is a recovering alcoholic who is an addictionologist. And it explains actually what is happening to your brain in the first year that you're in recovery. So, the other day when we were on here, somebody said she'd never heard of emotional sobriety. And actually, Bill Wilson wrote about it in a Grapevine article in 1958 after he had been corresponding with Carl Jung. And he began to understand that the reason that working in service with others works is that it helps to pull us away from these crazy patterns we have of emotional dependency. And then as we do service and we get out of ourselves and we start to, understand that we think all about ourselves, that's the ego, that as we do service, then we become more open to our spiritual recovery and to grow spiritually. But it takes time. It really takes time. And, Bill, it was in Bill's story where you read that Ebby says to him, "Why don't you try your own concept of a higher power?" So that's in the very beginning of our book. So you should always feel okay about developing your own understanding of a higher power, and don't let anybody tell you anything otherwise. And including, if you're a Christian, you're a Christian. I mean, it's not saying you shouldn't be whatever fits for you, but if it doesn't fit for you, then you follow what does fit for you. Thoughts or ideas? We're winding down the hour. Linda, I'm so glad you came on. I love you so much. And all of you, really. I just know Linda a little bit better. I'm very happy that people are coming on and talking and sharing a little bit of your stories. You can also message me privately, like if you have thoughts about your own spiritual recovery or questions and you don't feel comfortable asking them here, you are welcome to message me privately about things. I'd be glad to talk with you. And you're right, we're definitely not alone. We all have our own little struggles. Struggles don't go away just because you're in recovery. Linda can share this. I know I can share it with, life goes on. Life, we go up and down in our lives. Things happen, and what happens is if you stay active in the program, you get more and more comfortable with utilizing the tools, the steps of the program to help you to cope with the things that happen in your life. Linda says she gets up every morning and gets spiritually connected. And yes, I did not always do that either in the first 15 years, but yeah, God allowed you to experience a big dose of humble pie. Mm-hmm. Me too. I was brought to my knees and I started getting spiritually connected every morning. Absolutely. I think that thing of starting your morning with spiritual connection, with a quiet time, with prayer, the more that you get in the habit of those positive things. I do gratitude list every morning and send things out to people. I send my gratitude to other members of my home group and some of my good friends in the program. And the more that I do that, the more that I take positive action, the more that that builds a positive sense inside of me. And when I start my day on that positive footing, I wake up feeling really crummy. I had some discouraging news the other day, and I woke up kind of like, oh, is life worth going on? But I made myself do those gratitudes. I made myself read my spiritual readings and do my meditation and prayer because that is what I do every day. It's not an option not to do it. In the beginning, when my sponsor first told me I had to do it, I couldn't sit still for more than 2 or 3 minutes. But today, it's about 30 to 45 minutes every morning to do my little practices. And by the time I'm done with that and I go outside to let my chickens out and walk my dogs, I'm in a good mood. So it's a choice. And if you get in the habit of doing it, no matter how you feel, you'll see that you have a choice to turn your day around. It does take some work when you're in a negative kind of frame of mind, and if you're depressed or if you've had discouraging news. But if you continue to practice, that's why it's called practice, because you do it every day, then it becomes a choice. So thank you, Tanya. Thank you. I appreciate that. I love this work. I don't do it because it's a chore. I would tell you that. I wouldn't do it if it was a chore. I do it because it's a spiritual calling. It really is. I feel that my higher power has laid this on my heart and that I love it. So, and I tell people this more and more. I didn't used to say it out loud, but I get up in the morning and I say, well, God, what do you got for me today? And then I go through life and I watch. I just watch. And sure enough, things show up. Yes, absolutely. Attitude of gratitude is really true. Absolutely. And I think the more that you do positive practices and you watch, what you will see is more and more positive people show up in your life. It's like you generate positive energy, and that energy comes back to you like tenfold. It's unbelievable. And if you don't believe it, I have a little experiment for you. This is the first experiment I ever did in positive thinking. I was watching a little thing on positive thinking on TV, and the guy said, just when you go into the parking lot, like at the mall or a parking place, up, a shopping center, before you go in there, with all your heart, believe that your parking place is going to be there and say to yourself over and over again as you're driving in, my parking place is always waiting for me. My parking place is always waiting for me. And watch what happens. Just try it and see. It's a little spiritual experiment. See what happens and let me know. I guarantee it. It's really fun to do little experiments like that because it's all about the energy that you put out. And if you're walking around going like, "Oh, I hate going to this shopping. I hate going to Walmart. There's never any parking places. Oh, woe is me. I hate it. I hate it." Guess what you'll draw to you? Try it. Try it and see. Say, my parking place is always waiting for me. I never park more than 4 cars back. And that's the truth. So, there you go. Any last thoughts? All right, well, I thank you. And let's, good, try it and see. Because if you try that and it works, see, and you can really keep that positive attitude, then you're going to see that if you keep a positive attitude towards everything in your life, guess what's going to happen? That's right. What goes into the mind comes out in life. That's it. That's exactly it. So let's take a few breaths together and just think to yourself what you have to be grateful for today. Thank the universe or God or whoever your higher power is that for bringing us all together today. I'm so very grateful. This just raises my spirits. What a way to end the day. Thank you so much. And please spread the word if you have a chance that we're going to do this on Tuesdays and Saturdays. I may change the Tuesday to Monday, I'm not sure, but I'll give you notice of it. And please come back. I just love you all. Thank you so much. And have a wonderful, wonderful evening. Thank you. Oh, Carla. Good night, dear. Much love.